Welcome everybody to kickoff of our 7th annual Animal Law Week. We've got a really great lineup of speakers and events and a little film screening as well. You can find more information about all of those on our Animal Law and Policy Program website, which is animal.law.harvard.edu. So we're kicking off with a really great special talk today. It's a bit of a book talk with Peter Brandt, litigator with the Humane Society of the United States, and a visual artist, Sue Coe. Peter was actually our first real visiting fellow back in 2017. He took a bit of a break from practice to flesh out this book idea and get some of the introductory and chapters written. And now here we are a few years later with a fully fledged book that's out in print and available at all fine booksellers. And so the book is entitled Indefensible: Adventures of a Farm Animal Protection Lawyer. And it's about his time litigating at the Humane Society of the United States. So I'll give a quick intro for him, a bit of his bio, and then I'll talk a little bit about Sue, and then I'll hand it over to them to have a conversation about the themes that come up in the book and their own careers. So Peter is a managing attorney at the Humane Society of the United States. During his fellowship, he began work on this book about his experiences there. And it was just published by Lantern Books in October. He's been at the forefront of some of the toughest cases of animal abuse in the last 10 years, including supervising a team of lawyers working to protect the interests of farm animals at HSUS. The book details his realization of intensive factory farming's further costs to wild creatures and their habitats, as well as clean water and clean air, and demonstrates how curbing animal agriculture is one of the few ways to make an immediate positive difference to climate change. Many of you in the animal protection field may already be familiar with Sue Coe's work. It's pretty ubiquitous throughout the movement. And Sue is considered one of the foremost political artists working today. Her art, as you've seen, her art often includes animal rights commentary, although she also creates imagery that centralizes the rights of marginalized peoples and criticizes capitalism. Sue's work has been shown and collected by various internal arts institutions, including Harvard Art Museum and Yale's art collection as well. Through the process of printmaking, Sue further found a way to serve a broader audience, disseminating her messages through affordably priced prints acceptable to people of all financial means. A firm believer in the power of media to affect social change, Sue's work has been published in the New York Times, the New Yorker, Rolling Stone, and countless other periodicals as well. In 2015, Sue was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Women's Caucus for Art, and she received rave reviews for her 2018 solo exhibition at MoMA's PS1, which was entitled Sue Coe, Graphic Resistance. With that, I will hand it over to Sue and Peter, and please, we will take questions. If you have any questions for Sue and Peter, please put them in the Q&A, and I will ask them towards the end of the talk. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to start before Sue can get a word in, because I'm so happy with this discovery I made. I was doing a bit of homework last night, rereading some articles, and I think Sue's the only artist to have this honor, but within a couple years of each other, the New York Times and the New Yorker said very similar things about Sue. In the New Yorker, the art critic for the New Yorker said her meanings register with all the subtlety of a punch in the stomach. And then more recently, in the New York Times, her work can feel like a punch in the face or a call to action, or both. But then there's the one we're all familiar with, which is my interview with Sue in Punk Planet magazine in the year 2000, where I was the first one to describe your work using physical violence imagery. So you're welcome, New York Times and New Yorker. So yeah, we met long ago in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then more recently, in the last few years, we've been sort of pen pals, and we meet up and go to art museums. And some of the only international travel I've done has been traveling to England and going to art museums with Sue, which is a fantastic experience. And this is the last thing I'll say, and she didn't know I was going to say this, but walking into the Tate Modern and walking around with Sue was one of the most fun things you can do, because you'll go into a room and it's all hushed and reverent and people looking at art, and Sue will walk in and say something like, what an unbelievable load of crap. No wonder it's free to get in. So I've had some great, those are when we're not really planning to go see anything in particular. And then we've gone to things like that Sue really wanted to go see, like the French painter Soutine. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. They've been great experiences for me. So I don't know, that's what I remember. Those are some of the highlights of our friendship. But yeah. Any initial thoughts, Sue?
I am here only to promote your book, this book, because it's brilliant. And for young law students, it's imperative to read this book. Peter and I have a relationship of arguing, mostly, and he's just a genius. I mean, he's relentless with animal rights. And I've learned a lot about the law and where it fails from him. You know, because we're working within a broken system with a feedback loop. So it's how to enter the broken system where the wheels keep turning, but the cogs never engage. You know, we have massive social justice movements, and yet it never makes the link for obvious reasons of capitalism. And the book, to me, I mean, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, is really how to survive and make an end to that broken system and sometimes achieve a victory. And he's very brave. And on the cover, Peter is a very brave person. But on the cover, I chose that image of him rescuing chickens that they were burying alive in pits. And he was working on that because he has the longest arms. So he could reach into the pit and grab their poor bodies. And so it's not just a profound knowledge of the law, he also rescues animals. And that makes him brave to me. And I just think you should buy the book. If you can afford it, buy it. If you can't afford it, steal it. And
Sorry, Martin, at
it was
Lantern.
an honor to be doing the cover. Now, our arguments are a lot about abolition and welfare, which, you know, this is why that dialogue's very important to me, because I work from an abolitionist perspective based on Gary Francione. And he's working on, as animals don't have rights within the law, he's working in the welfare area. But there are some cases where you said in your book, you bruised the meat industry, bruised. And those cases are critically important. And, you know, remember that case, this is recent, where the judge was a Republican appointed judge, remember? And he wrote something so magnificent that it almost gave one hope, not actual hope, but there was a little tiny grain of hope in there, that there was a consciousness. And I think that's where our work comes in. As the longer we persist with the social justice movement, the more the jury is going to be conversant with animal rights, the more the judge is going to be conversant with animal rights. So we have a whole movement now going upwards into the legal system where there is change. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah. His name escapes me, but the Fourth Circuit judge you're talking about, who wrote that magnificent concurring opinion. I was thinking about that this morning also, and the parallels between what you do and what lawyers and people like me try to do. And it's just such an amazing piece of writing, his opinion.
Is it on the US website?
I believe it, gosh, I'm gonna get the caption wrong probably. It'll come to me. The case involves Smithfield, and it's neighbors suing the company Smithfield for just making their lives unbearable by spraying pig manure right next to their houses, all kinds of things. And there's many of these nuisance cases filed in North Carolina, and HSUS and my role and all that is very small compared to the lawyers that actually brought those cases. We submitted, a friend of the court brief pretty late in the process at the Fourth Circuit. But it's just so heartening to see. And it's really interesting to see, as law students, it's a beautiful example of legal writing. For one thing, you could be, maybe 12 years old, maybe 10 years old, and you could follow what this judge is writing about. And it's written vividly. And yeah, I mean, the parallels between what you do and what we do as lawyers, I love the writing that you do. I mean, we're sort of Gmail pen pals, and Sue writes, her emails are like publishable quality. But the writing you do on, whether it's a title or just a bit of text on your artwork, I just think is amazing. And one of them is, I want to give a couple examples. If animals believed in God, the devil would look like a human being. Woman walks into bar, is raped by 4 men on the pool table while 20 watch. And then in a vivisection piece, scientists discover a cure for empathy. And I just think the writing is so brilliant. And so much of good legal writing, like we saw in that Fourth Circuit concurring opinion, is to try to create images in the reader's mind. And what I had to learn, I had great teachers, some of them might be watching, but I had great teachers where you're tempted to, if you're writing about putting a pregnant pig in a gestation crate, you're tempted to just call it cruel, but you need to put the reader there. You need to describe it in a way that avoids boring language, because like the bureaucrats love boring language. And I think one of the problems as a lawyer or a law student is pretty much anything you read in like the Federal Register is the worst written, dullest stuff. And you're just bombarded with really dull writing. And often that's just because that's the way people learn to do it. But the worst stuff that happens is written in really boring language. I've been reading this Philippe Sands book. I know Sue and I watched this brilliant talk he gave recently at my alma mater. But it tracks the rise of the Nazi Party and what happened in Austria. And the inflammatory language goes away once the Nazis take over. Then it's really dull. And there are just these directives, kicking thousands of people out of their jobs, out of their civil service jobs. And they're written in the dullest possible way. So often if somebody's being really boring, they're doing it as a cover for doing something really terrible. But I think as advocates, we have to try to do what you do with your work, which is put people there. They should see the flies in the slaughterhouse. Anyway.
Well, a writing trick is if we're gazing at a mountain or a pond, and I ask you to describe what you're seeing about a mountain. You take the 20 words and then get rid of them. And it's going to be the 21st word that describes that scene in a completely original way that's going to make people think. And this morning, Peter, I was just reading London Review of Books excerpt about the suffragettes. This is 1909, and the suffragettes, they had an iron bit put in their mouth. This is force feeding, and it reminded me of your case with foie gras. They had an iron bit put in their mouths, and then a rubber tube inserted through the iron bit. And these were women who were vegetarian. The word vegan wasn't invented by them, but they were vegetarian. They were force-fed beef broth, raw eggs. So that was part of the cruelty of feeding them animal produce when they'd already made the connection of the oppression of all species. And this is 1909. And you've often said to me that animals had more legal protection in the early 20th century than they do now. Remember, you've said that because it was trains that had resting stations. So the trains would all go towards Chicago, but the animals could get off and rest. And now that is up to the discretion of the truck driver. So I think it's to find the words is also to find the truth, the kernels of history within that scene. So, you know, we can talk about, well, go on, Peter, speak.
Well, just to back up a tiny bit. So yeah, I've known Chris for a very long time, and I'm so happy they let me have the time and space to write much of this book. Like, I think a quarter of it or more I wrote because of the fellowship with Harvard. So I should thank them. I definitely could not have done this without that. And yeah, the goal with the book was just to write something that I would have wanted to read when I was 20 or 18 and thinking about what I'm going to do with the rest of my life and maybe go to law school or something else. So that was the goal. And when it was all done, and Sue heroically read early drafts of like every chapter, which was a godsend. And when it was all done, I was really kind of nervous about asking Sue to do the cover, because I was like, oh, I don't know if she'll do it. Like, for one, she doesn't need to do it at all. And maybe it's not, you know, we're friends, but I don't want to take advantage of that. And maybe the book's not radical enough, or maybe, you know, I work for an organization that's not a full-on abolitionist organization. So I was nervous about asking you, and it really wasn't, I thought it was about 50-50 whether or not you would do the cover, but very happy you did. It's my favorite part of the book. We should show some images also.
Okay.
Should we? Yeah.
Yeah. Chris?
And I'll also say, in addition to everything else she's doing, Sue has so many wildlife projects going on, whether she's putting up a house for a pine marten or rescuing a feral cat like this morning. Like, you have like another job looking out and making sure the hunters aren't sneaking in.
Oh, that's back to front, but never mind. I mean, it's going backwards, but it doesn't matter about the order.
Just hold on 1 second. Let me just I'm still getting this set up. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, just a thing about wildlife, Peter knows this, is 67% of wild animals have been killed by humans in the last 50 years. And that's what the meat industry has done. Okay, we're going backwards. That's good.
Hold on a second here. I just need to sort this 1 second. Okay, we'll get to the beginning here. Okay.
There we are.
So that's the cover I wanted on the right, which I match with depopulation because of the slowed down line speeds because of COVID. And but obviously it's too busy for a book cover, so I kept both. Obviously that's the best book cover, the one that's simple, but I think that one's very close to what Peter experienced when he was rescuing chickens. Next, please. And this is, I included this because Peter was telling me about ractopamine, which is banned in China. And I thought it's a growth hormone, obviously, and it's you know, it's Big Farmers Association with the meat industrial complex, but I thought it was injected into pigs. And he said, no, it's sprayed in the feed. So I got that one wrong. But, you know, that's, next, please.
It still makes the point.
Thank you. This is a real postcard from World War I, 1914. It was a photo, and I painted it, and it was supposed to be a happy card. It shows a brothel on the left and a sow that they've just captured, they're going to eat. And it was, this was happy times for the troops. They got food and the women. And I just saw the teats on this poor pig. And just how that was so funny to them, that it was a mass-produced card. And I was thinking too that, you know, last week they were, the teats, the udders on the cows froze. So they were using, what's that thing that produces fire? They were burning off the udders with a blowtorch. They were burning off the udders of cows, and now they're going to be slaughtered for beef. And how we keep cycling through the female, because factory farming is predominantly female. Next, please. This is related to Peter's cases of the appalling conditions. And from my perspective, we shouldn't even be discussing conditions. There should be an abolition of all use. But I think this is important to show that this is typical, that we complain about our restriction because of COVID, and these are other lives that their whole short lives are in these restricted cages, eaten alive by maggots. And it's, once you realize the enormity, you're broken as a person, but we're all broken in some way. Next, please. This is factory farm, and I just was thinking about bovine spongiform encephalitis and mad cow disease, and how all these animals are mad. They just go mad in these confined situations, and it's all confined. The definition of factory farm is more than 50 units. So this terminology is very suspect to me, factory farm. So free range is all right? No, it's not. But to do this sort of work, just to show the enormity, when I'm trying to show each individual animal, is very difficult, because it's billions of animals, and the human being cannot conceive of this at all. I mean, that's our problem. And government, it really exists to protect humans from each other. You know, that's the Hobbesian idea of government. And it's not working too well right now. Next, please. This is, you know, I've been in about 40 slaughterhouses, and I'm very close to a slaughterhouse here. So I'm good with drawing in a slaughterhouse because I have something to do and I can deal with it. I cannot watch any video. I don't know how investigators do that. I just can't watch any video of animals being tortured. And I was in this slaughterhouse, and the cow had a broken back or broken leg, and they were playing hard, heavy metal, which they do in slaughterhouses. And that was on the sound system. And this cow kept beating the side of this is a metal kill pen. She's in a restraining pen, and she kept beating the sides of the restraining pen with her hooves while they went to lunch. So I was drawing her for an hour. She kept falling down because she couldn't stand. She was banging on the sides, and all the other cows are in the same kill floor. They're moved in 6 at a time, and they could see her trying to escape, and she could never escape. And I watched, she hadn't been milked, so the milk mingled with the blood and went into the kill floor. It went down the drain, because this is a sort of gravity thing where all the blood and water, it's constant water where they're cleaning up, goes down this drain. And I just watched this milk go down, and these guys, you know, there are very few people on the kill floor because it's dangerous. I mean, these cows are not, they're stunned, but sometimes they're not stunned enough. So they're kicking. And the first thing they do is take the face off and clip off the hooves. So, and they're swinging. So this is thousands of pounds of kicking, swinging animal, upside down hoisted. And it's exsanguination. As you know, the animal has to be alive, just stunned, so the blood, the heart pumps the blood out of the body. And so I was in there for an hour alone with her. The guys had gone to lunch, and just thinking, this is a degradation, everything. It's beyond, you know, and I'm not using any artistic license with this. This is what it looked like. And the flies in there, it was summer, were just everywhere. Next, please. This is a slaughterhouse in Trenton, which was really terrible. Well, they're all terrible. And in fact, this is, in a slaughterhouse, is the end of the suffering, because these animals come an average of 350 miles in a truck in extreme heat or cold to be slaughtered. And this shipment was very late. So the guys were just worried about, they wouldn't get paid if they couldn't slaughter. And, you know, one of the guys said, human beings are too corrupt to rule anymore. And so they know what's going on. But I just was standing right there. So I'm trying to show you without hidden video, because this is very transparent. That's important to me, that those workers can see what I'm doing, and I'm not taking from them. This is true, and they can tell me, oh, you got that wrong, or you didn't draw the continuous line system correctly, and I can give them the drawing. It's not taking, it's not. And they always say, oh, you're not an animal rights activist, are you? And I always say, I'm English. That's worked for 40 years, that answer. I don't know why. Next, please. This is live transport. As we speak today, those bulls are being unloaded. After 3 weeks, they couldn't be unloaded. Those ships are being unloaded in Turkey. This ship was very common. The ship caught on fire. It was going from Perth, Australia with sheep to Jordan. And the New York Times covered it with a couple of lines and said, only 6 lives were lost. Oh, no, sorry. No lives were lost. So the thousands of sheep went down, and that was the conclusion. No, because the sailors got off, and these are fully mechanized ships. So there's hardly any actual sailors on board. There were 8, I think, on this. Next, please. This is just a very popular print, Modern Man followed by the ghost of his meat. People like this. And what's really good about art, I'm prejudiced in saying this, is I'm not telling people how to think. I'm asking people to look through my eyes. And then you can have your own thoughts about what's going on. And people just think about this and get it. And I do think arts can be very successful because it opens up a dialogue, because it's not a moral judgment on people that are still eating meat. I've eaten animals in the past. That's how I can equalize my outrage. I've done it. So when people look at art, they can come to their own feelings about this. And if I failed, so if someone gets my book or get Peter's book, and I say, well, if you're not a vegan after seeing my work, then how have I failed you? And that's a good opening for people, because then they'll think again, what can I do better to improve, to convince you? And that does work. People do think about it. And next, please. And this one, I was just enraged. I've done many on this. Again, it's this was hoof and mouth, which is not fatal to pigs, but this is South Korea, but it could be anywhere in the world. This is where they buried alive millions of pigs and piglets in plastic. And the people in that area were completely, they would turn on their taps and their tap would run red with blood. So the pigs were crushed under the weight of thousands and thousands of other pigs. And they could hear the pigs screaming whilst underneath in the burial pits. This is the type of vandalism onto other life that is just has to stop. And I think we're getting to the point now in this society where it will stop. I'm actually seeing globally, the animal rights movement is huge. It's just taking off. So definitely hopeful. Next, please. And this is the last one, which is science has said repeatedly, at least for 20 years, the incursion into wildlife, eating animal products, that factory farms are incubators for zoonotic viruses. Been saying this over and over and over again. And here we are, that, you know, this is an alliteration on coronavirus, carnivorous. And here we are. This is going to cost society millions of human deaths. And trillions of dollars, and will impact the poorest people, has impacted the poorest, most ethical people first, the ones that don't consume high levels of animal products. So this needs to be, you know, full alarm fire now. How, what else will it take? What else will it take? And I see very little in the media making this connection. So we need to go with this and keep repeating it and do. I don't know how I'd feel if I was a scientist. I kept warning, just not heard, because the voice of the meat industry shouts out everything. Next, that's the end. Peter, you can talk now.
Well, there's a lot I could say. One of the things I like, I remember when we first met in Tacoma, Washington, after your talk at the art museum there, we talked a good deal about your depiction of workers in slaughter facilities. And it wasn't a new idea to me, but you were just very empathetic. And one of my favorite pieces of yours is, I think he's an older guy. You drew, I think it's a drawing outside Montreal with the veal slaughter.
Veal skinner.
Yeah, and he'd been doing it maybe since he was 12, and you can see in the drawing he's missing chunks of his fingers.
Yeah, all his fingers. He had thumbs. Because the knife was so sharp, they took off It's the most skilled job in the slaughterhouse field. And he peeled back the skin. And it was supposed to be an organic veal for the Manhattan market, high end. And he said, look at this. This is the antibiotic capsule underneath the skin. Look. And that was it. It was skinning. So, you know, but 70 years old and still in a slaughterhouse, or kids, you know, that's who's there. And yes, there are some psychopaths in there that are criminalized, but it's mainly in the crime of economics, and the time is soon. The time is very soon. It's not about criminalizing the ones one gets on hidden video. That's bad enough, but it's the economics. That's what we must understand.
Yeah. And one of the things I was trying to do in the book was move past sort of like somber point by point arguments, which part of that was selfish, because that's what I've done every day for years and years and years, and I wanted to try something different. But it's time to start ridiculing. Just, this is so dumb. Like, this is so dumb. And it's, you know, there's, I'll paraphrase the Mark Twain quote, but I don't know if it was Mark Twain, you know, the one thing the devil can't stand is laughter, you know, and it's time to start making, and there's a lot of humor in your work. And I know you to be, you know, when I met you, I was like, well, she's exactly what I thought she would be like from her work, but you're much funnier than you might imagine after, you know, people watching her, seeing the artwork. But that sense of humor, I think, is so powerful, and it's,
well, thank you for that. So I was just going to go into all the litany of the point by point, which no one ever hears. Thank you for interrupting me. I was just about to do that.
Well, it's important to do that, but it's not the only tool in the toolbox. You know, it's very important, and believe me, you need to have all your facts, and you need to have all your citations. You need to have that stuff. But some of the best stuff I've seen, and this is kind of terrible to tell a group of Harvard Law School students and anyone else, some of the best stuff I've seen has been stand-up comedians talking about how ludicrous some of this is, you know, and they're not vegetarian even, but just, you know, the reality, if you describe a circus and the reality of that, Patton Oswalt did a brilliant bit about that, which I used to show when I taught law school classes, which might be partly why I don't teach law school classes anymore. But it's just a brilliant description of this is what's going on, and it's really quite terrifying, you know. So yeah, yeah. I don't know. You probably should go into the point by point discussion.
I don't know. I was just going to go into the Evel Knievel doll.
Yeah, this is actually, speaking of poetic license, after the book was published. So I'm a distant relative of Evel Knievel, which a lot of people who are not old, you know, in their 30s or 40s may have no idea who I'm talking about. But that's what I was always told. And my grandmother, who lived to be 101, I think the information came from her. But then after the book was published, there was some communication, or the book was already done, and there was some communication amongst my mom and aunts, and like, no, we're not really related. But I'm not sure who to believe, and I'm going with I'm related to Evel Knievel. But yeah, that's in the book, and I tried to make the book fun. Because unlike artwork, you know, if you're going to read a book, well, it's maybe a longer time commitment. You know, Sue can create a masterpiece. You're probably not going to look at it for 10 hours, you know, which if you're a slow reader like me, it's going to take you a long time to read a book. So I wanted to make it engaging and hopefully personal and fun. So there you have it.
It's fun. And autobiography is a poison well for writers. They can only dip into it once. And you dipped into it for this to deliver the content. So it's a beautiful read between humor, despair, all of it. And you did that brilliantly. And he only did it once for the animals. You did it one time and that's it.
Yeah, I'm never going to
yeah.
write anything with citations again. Off the clock, that is. Well, I don't know how we're doing on time, and if we have a couple minutes before we have to take some questions, maybe.
Yeah, just a couple too. And I wondered if I could jump in, Peter. You do a really nice job in the book in the introduction explaining kind of the structure, like the motivation and the structure and layout of the book. If you could talk a little bit about that, I think that would be helpful to know.
Yeah, it tracks roughly chronologically the life of a farm animal, focusing on land animals, focusing primarily on the United States, but it goes through, after some introductory stuff, the birth, and then the confinement, and then all of the terrible stuff that comes with confining, 600,000 chickens on 4 acres of property and crammed into tiny buildings. Again, so dumb. People will look back on this. If aliens came down, they would think, oh, they're trying to create, the product here is influenza. They're trying to create an influenza pandemic. You couldn't do a better job than to do what we're doing right now. And as a side note, just last week, a strain of avian influenza at a Russian chicken farm jumped to humans for the first time of this particular strain. So anyway, the book goes from birth through confinement, environmental and public health problems with that, and then transport, which Sue mentioned earlier, which is putting animals on trucks, driving them all over the place, and then eventually to slaughter, which is the last chapter in the book. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do. It's not definitive, obviously, but I wanted to give my impression of the whole system and what's wrong with it.
Great. We do have some questions that have come in. First is a technical one, asking, you'd referenced a Fourth Circuit case early on. Do you have a site or a link to that?
My dad has kindly supplied a link, which I can probably put in the chat.
Send me in the chat and I'll put it in the Q&A.
Yeah, it's Judge Wilkinson's concurring opinion in a recent Fourth Circuit case. So yeah, I'll send that around.
Okay, great.
And others?
So next question, one for you, Sue. One of our other fellows, Martha Smith Blackmore, asked, the image of the ship at sea reminds her of J.W.W. Turner's The Slave Ship, and asking if that was an influence on that piece.
No, it wasn't, although, no, I tried to do that as accurately as possible. So like Peter, I do massive amounts of research and then drop it. So I can't do that in art, but I have to know about it. And that ship was it was built up. It was a container ship. So the sheep that was a 3.5-week journey where the sheep were exposed to all the elements. And so I tried to do that as accurately as possible. When I researched the company, it was a literal joke. It was Indian. I went to the address of the ship owner, and the street was called Meat Street in Kolkata, and it didn't exist. So it was layers of just deception. And that was my intent, just to do it as accurately as possible. But the research very rarely goes into the art because it just confuses. It just has to be like a source. It has to be culled down to something else in art. So, but thank you for the question.
Great. And now we've got another one. So this one says, basically, the American left has a poor record on support for animal issues. One explanation this person's heard is that it rests on the fact that a strong Marxist element in American radicalism has dismissed animal rights as bourgeois fancy, as Marx and Engels did. We do not have the Fabian socialist tradition with its strong ties to animal rights via Salt and others. What is to be done here in bridging this historical challenge with the American left?
It's definitely one for Sue.
Oh, thanks. Well, Marx died before he could write about a socialist world. This is a big problem. So he was working on that book. There's enough there, you know, in terms of the peasant war that Marx and Engels both studied, which is absolutely representing animals in their how animals were exploited. So they were familiar with that. And I think it's an absolute abomination that the left has not made those connections. And it's happening now with Niebuhr and, you know, great philosophers. It's certainly happening. But, you know, when I joined the party when I was a kid, I was told I was bourgeois. This was a bourgeois consideration. And then when I mentioned feminism, that was also a bourgeois consideration. So rather than it being ideological, I see it, well, who's in control of reading all the books? You know, who's in control of the books? So I think that is changing. And it's very obvious to me. I'm not an animal person that's going to say, oh, it's just the same under capitalism as socialism. Of course it's not. That's ridiculous. So that change has to happen. And I think it is happening because the readers of the books will change. And that will come much more to be joined with other social justice movements. It's happening now, much later than it should. But that's an excellent question. And I just can't explain to you the horror I had. And then I met Angela Davis once, you know, my hero, who's been a vegan for years. And she just was so brilliant. So if you want to see how the left, you know, and Angela Davis was arrested, you know, as she was vice president of the Communist Party of the United States, she made all those connections, and her analysis of how we exploit animals is absolutely brilliant. So if she were to redo her book, Race, Gender and Class, it would be Race, Gender, Class and Speciesism now. So she is in the forefront of making these connections, a true hero on the left, if that helps. Thank you.
Great. This one might be more directed at Peter. It's from Calvin Neufeld. It says, wonderful presentation, powerful artwork and commentary. He's working to expose and close a prison abattoir in Canada that uses prison labor to slaughter animals. He's obtained documentation involving improper slaughter, drug use, money laundering, and other illegal activities. You've witnessed illegal activities in slaughterhouses, and yet it seems they continue to operate. What advice do you have for how the documentation of illegal slaughterhouse activities can be used effectively to shut a slaughterhouse down?
It's really tough. I mean, that's obviously a big question. And coincidentally, I'm actually in British Columbia. I've been here for a little while, but I don't know. I've heard about this, but I don't know the specifics of Canadian prisons and the Canadian legal system, obviously. You know, it's tough. Like the short answer, I guess, would be very rarely do the tactics used in the last 15 years actually shut a facility down. And by tactics, I mean animal group tactics of investigations, horrible video, news stories, significant media coverage, etc. The typical paradigm, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, is the people who are really calling the shots and profiting, you know, who live in the big houses, they go fire whoever's in the video. They find, you know, whoever they're going to throw under the bus, they go fire them. And they say, okay, we've done it, you know, or they assist in a prosecution or something like that. And and they say this is not up to our standards. We're so surprised. Everybody's always so surprised that this would be happening. And the news cycle dies down and things continue, which is a really depressing reality, but it's one we have to grapple with. That happens a lot. So it's just, I don't have a good recipe for how to get to the people who are not in the video, the people who are actually calling the shots. It's very hard. And, I've been involved somewhat, along with a team of brilliant people, but I've been involved somewhat with an investigation that does lead to sort of a significant financial hit. But you often need to, it's sort of the Al Capone and his tax return problem. You often need something that's not exactly related to the animal cruelty in the video. You need fraud, or if you look at what's happening in the United States with price fixing and antitrust litigation, and the broiler chicken industry and the pork industry, there's some phenomenal stuff there. And that's what these companies are really worried about. The people with the big houses are really worried about a federal indictment for price fixing. And so it's hard. I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but you need to sometimes get past what's in the video, which is horrific. And as a lawyer, you have to try to find, okay, this may be a bit boring, but you need to find, okay, are they giving drugs they're not supposed to be giving? Are they selling meat to the government that their contract says they shouldn't be selling? Is there fraud? Is there price fixing? And that stuff's it's just really difficult to find. The more the lid is pried open, and the more transparency there is, the more this will come to light. And we've seen this a little bit with COVID. Like, to some extent, people are seeing inside slaughter facilities. Probably more people are getting a sense of what's going on there than before, because they've just turned into it's just a tragedy what's happened at these major slaughter facilities with the spread of COVID-19. Sorry, it's a long answer, but there you go.
And it is the case too that the head of the large kosher slaughter place in Iowa, Agri-Processors, was actually imprisoned for the labor and immigration violations, not the animal cruelty, and also happens to be the first person to have their sentence commuted by the former president. Got another question here. Kim Stallwood asks, he's been studying Philip Sands, including East-West Street, and asking what animal rights advocates can learn from Sands' legal, scholarly, and written work.
That's great. Hi, Kim. Fond memories of hanging out with Kim and Sue. And I mean, he's a great writer. And he is one, I didn't realize, he's one that has drawn his work. I don't know enough about him to probably give a very good answer, but he's done international environmental law. He goes after governments for human rights violations. And then I think just any history of World War II, like his work has been, I would like to know more about it. Sue knows her history far better than I do in the United States and in Europe. I don't know, what do you think, Sue?
Hi, Kim. I was just thinking back to the other question. Sorry, Kim. It's about, there are prison slaughterhouses in America, which I've been in. And so you have to imagine the scene of prison guards who are armed, guarding slaughterers with stun guns and knives. And this is to rehabilitate the prisoners into becoming slaughterers. And this is dire. So yes, they're exploiting labor within the prison system. So I completely agree with you about the answer, Peter, that it's going to be the devil is in the details of the economics of that to the person who's interested in that issue in Canada. For the rat line, Kim, the amount of research as a lawyer he did is so massive. And that's, I think, what's so repressive about his history is that everything starts with the Nuremberg trials, and then the details he's amassed. And again, this is, it's a cliche, but his emotional intelligence in dealing with the relatives to understand them and get them to back up the legal documentation is astonishing. And I know he's going to get more into animal justice issues, and he's a formidable opponent. But everything starts there with the Nuremberg trials, which set the precedent for, should we have vaccine passports, for example? Without that, without the law precedent, this would be, you can imagine the chaos added on here with this sort of, anyway, thank you for the question, Kim.
Okay, we just got about 1 minute left, so I'll just ask this quick one from Matthew Liebman. Sue, I've had a print of yours entitled "They Need a Good Lawyer" hanging in his office for years. He's curious what inspired that particular work.
Well, at the time, thank you very much for having that print. I love that little print, and it's just a fundraiser print. So you can do so many multiples to raise money for animal groups, which I've loved doing over the decades. And that's one of them until the plate's worn down to almost nothing now. But they didn't have good lawyers back in those days. And now they have Peter. They have a Peter Brandt. Look, the animals have that. They have a Gary Francione and Anna Charlton and Marianne. They've got the good lawyers now. But when I did that print, they had nothing. I'm missing off a lot of names of incredible lawyers. But this is, it's so hopeful from when I did that print.
Great. All right, well, that's all we have time for. I'd like to first thank our co-sponsors, the Harvard Student Animal Law Society, for helping organize this week's events. And a super great thank you to both Sue Coe and Peter Brandt for putting the time into writing this book and getting it out there, but also taking the time to share those experiences with us today. Thank you both so much.
Thanks. This was so much fun.
All right,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.